It is actually illegal to build the house your grandparents grew up in. I'm not joking. If you tried to take the blueprints of a standard, affordable family home from 1920 and build it today in almost any major city in North America or Australia, you would be shut down immediately. You would be fined, sued, and your construction site would be padlocked. We are facing the biggest housing crisis in history with an entire generation locked out of ownership. Yet, in 75% of our residential land, it is against the law to build anything other than a detached single-family mansion. We aren't facing a housing shortage because we forgot how to build. We are facing a shortage because we made affordable housing a crime. Everyone talks about the housing crisis like it is some mysterious weather event that just happened to us. Politicians stand up and shout about greedy developers. They shout about foreign investors. They shout about supply chains. But they are lying to you, or at least they are distracting you from the real, uncomfortable truth. The reason you cannot afford a house is not because construction is too expensive. It is not because there is no land left. The reason is that for the last 80 years, we have designed a legal system specifically intended to keep housing expensive. We have laws that force builders to waste land. We have laws that force builders to prioritize cars over people. And we have laws that give your neighbors the power to bankrupt anyone who tries to build something affordable next door. To understand how we got here, we have to go back to a specific moment in history when we decided that the freedom to build on your own land was dangerous. Before the 1920s, if you owned a piece of land, you could pretty much build whatever you wanted on it. If you wanted to build a small cottage, you did. If you wanted to build a shop on the bottom floor and live on the top floor, that was normal. That is how we built the most beloved neighborhoods in the world. Think about the historic parts of Boston, or the charming streets of Georgetown, or the older parts of Toronto. People love these places. They pay huge amounts of money to live there. But here is the irony. In almost all of those neighborhoods, the buildings that exist there today would be illegal to build from scratch right now. They are too close to the street. They don't have enough parking. The lots are too small. They are grandfathered in, meaning they are allowed to stay only because they were already there before the rules changed. So what changed? In 1926, a Supreme Court case called Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty Company changed everything. This is where the concept of zoning was legally solidified. Before this, you couldn't build a glue factory next to a hospital because that was a nuisance. That makes sense. But Euclid zoning went much further. It decided that even residential buildings could be considered a nuisance to other residential buildings. Specifically, the court decided that apartment buildings were, and I quote, parasites in single-family neighborhoods. They decided that having a duplex or a small apartment block near a detached house would ruin the character of the neighborhood and lower property values. This was the moment we broke the housing market. By separating everything into strict zones, we made it illegal to build the missing middle. The missing middle is all that stuff between a giant skyscraper and a single-family house. It is the duplexes, the fourplexes, the townhouses, the courtyard apartments. These are the most affordable ways to live because they share the cost of the land. If you put 4 families on one piece of land, the land cost for each family drops by 75%. But in most American and Canadian cities, this type of building is banned on the vast majority of residential land. Let's look at the math of why this destroys affordability. Imagine you are a developer. You are not a villain. You are just a business owner trying to make a living. You buy a plot of land for $1 million. If you are allowed to build a 10-unit apartment building, the land cost per unit is $100,000. You can probably sell those apartments for $300,000 or $400,000 and make a profit while providing affordable homes. But then the city zoning code steps in. The code says, sorry, this land is zoned R1. That means single-family residential only. You can only build one house on this lot. Now, the math changes completely. That one house still has to cover the $1 million land cost. Plus, you have to pay for the materials and labor to build a pretty big house to justify the price. You can't put a tiny shack on $1 million lot. So you build a luxury mansion. You have to sell it for $2 or $3 million just to break even. This is why you only see luxury condos and luxury mansions being built. It is not because developers hate poor people. It is because the law has made it mathematically impossible to make a profit on cheap housing. The fixed costs, driven by zoning and regulation, are so high that the only thing you can legally build without going bankrupt is a luxury unit. But it gets worse. Let's talk about the silent killer of housing affordability that almost nobody notices until it is pointed out to them: parking minimums. In most cities, if you want to build an apartment for a human being, the law forces you to also build a bedroom for their car. It is often mandated that for every apartment unit, you must provide 1 or 2 off-street parking spots. This sounds convenient, right? Who doesn't want parking? But parking is incredibly expensive. If you are building an underground garage, a single parking spot can cost $50,000 to construct. That is $50,000 added to the price of the apartment, whether the person living there has a car or not. If you are building above ground, that parking spot takes up 300 square feet of space. That is space that could have been a bedroom. It is space that could have been a living room. Instead, it is empty asphalt. We have cities where we have more housing for cars than we do for homeless people. By forcing developers to build parking, we are effectively taxing housing to subsidize driving. And because this increases the cost of building so much, rents go up and sale prices go up. Now, you might be thinking, okay, the laws are bad, so let's just change the laws. Let's just tell the city council to get rid of zoning and parking minimums. This brings us to the most dangerous part of the story. The reason these laws exist is not because politicians are stupid. It is because they are doing exactly what their voters want. And the voters are the people who already own houses. See, if you own a home, you have a massive financial incentive to stop any new building in your neighborhood. Your house is probably the biggest asset you own. It is your retirement fund. You want its value to go up. The basic law of economics is supply and demand. If the supply of housing stays low and demand stays high, the price of your asset goes up. If a developer comes in and builds 100 new affordable apartments down the street, the supply goes up. That might stabilize prices. As a homeowner, you don't want stabilized prices. You want skyrocketing prices. So homeowners form what economists effectively call a cartel. They use local government meetings to block new construction. They show up at City Hall on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. and scream at the council members. They say things like, "This new building will cause too much traffic," or "This building will cast a shadow on my garden," or the most famous one, "This building doesn't fit the neighborhood character." Neighborhood character is a weaponized phrase. It sounds nice. It sounds like preserving history. But in reality, it is usually code for keeping out people who make less money than the current residents. It is a way to pull up the ladder after you have climbed it. These homeowners weaponize the legal process. They demand environmental reviews. They demand shadow studies. They demand traffic impact reports. Let me give you an example of how insane this bureaucracy gets. In San Francisco, there was a plan to build a single public toilet in a park, just a bathroom. It took years of planning and was projected to cost $1.7 million. Why? Because of the reviews, the committees, the architectural approvals, and the endless public input sessions. Now imagine trying to build a 50-unit apartment building. The delay alone kills the project. Time is money in construction. If a developer has to borrow money to buy land, they are paying interest on that loan every single day. If the city council delays a project for 3 years with hearings and reviews, that is 3 years of interest payments piling up. That adds millions of dollars to the cost of the project. Who pays for that? You do. The renter, the buyer. The extra cost is passed on to the final price. If the delay is too long, the developer just walks away and nothing gets built at all. This is a quiet crisis. You don't see the houses that were never built. You don't see the affordable apartments that died in a committee meeting 3 years ago. You just see the high prices and wonder why. This system has created a form of modern feudalism. We are splitting society into 2 distinct classes: the landed gentry who own property and vote to restrict supply to boost their wealth, and the serfs, the renters who pay half their income to the lords for the privilege of having a roof over their heads. The renters have almost no say in this process because they move around more often, they vote less in local elections, and they don't have the time to go to city council meetings because they are working 2 jobs to pay the rent. This is causing a demographic collapse. It is not just about money. It is about the future of our species. Young people are not having kids. Why? Because they live in a 600 square foot box with a roommate. They cannot imagine bringing a child into that situation. They look at the price of a 3-bedroom house and they see a number that is 10 times their annual salary. So they delay starting a family. They wait. And then they wait some more. And eventually, many of them just give up. We are literally zoning ourselves out of existence. We are prioritizing the preservation of a neighborhood's aesthetic over the preservation of the next generation. Let's look at a place that does it differently to prove that this is a choice, not a law of nature. Look at Tokyo, Japan. Tokyo is the biggest city in the world. It has limited land. It has a high population. By all logic, it should be the most expensive place on earth. But it isn't. You can buy a brand new detached single-family home in Tokyo for $300,000 or $400,000. Rent is reasonable? Why? Because Japan took the power to zone away from local neighbors. In Japan, zoning is a national law. If you own land, you have the right to build. The neighbors cannot stop you just because they don't like the look of your building. If you meet the safety standards and the height limits, you get your permit and you build. Supply keeps up with demand. Houses in Japan are seen as a consumer good, like a car, not a speculative investment vehicle meant to make you rich. Because they build so much, housing depreciates. It gets cheaper as it gets older. That sounds terrifying to an American homeowner, but it is great for a young family trying to buy their first home. But in the West, we have gone in the opposite direction. We have tied our entire economy to the idea that house prices must always go up. If house prices drop, the economy crashes, banks fail, and homeowners revolt. So the government does everything it can to prop up the market. They offer tax breaks for owners. They guarantee mortgage, and they enforce strict zoning to limit supply. It is a Ponzi scheme where the early investors get rich and the new entrants get crushed. There is also a darker history here that we need to acknowledge. When zoning was first invented in the U.S., it wasn't just about property values. It was about segregation. In the early 20th century, cities couldn't legally say, "Black people can't live here." The Supreme Court struck that down, so they got creative. They invented single-family zoning. They said, "You can only build expensive houses on big lots here." They knew that this would effectively exclude minority populations who, at the time, had less wealth. It was economic segregation intended to produce racial segregation. Today, the explicit racism is gone from the law books, but the effect is exactly the same. Exclusionary zoning keeps poor people out of rich neighborhoods. It prevents low-income workers from moving to where the good jobs are. It traps people in poverty because they cannot afford to move to the cities with high productivity. This hurts the entire economy. It is estimated that the U.S. economy loses trillions of dollars a year because workers are stuck in places with no jobs, simply because they cannot afford the rent in places like New York or San Francisco. So when you see a sign in a front yard that says, "Save our neighborhood" or "No to high rises," you need to translate that in your head. What that sign really says is, "I got mine and I don't care if you get yours." It says, "I prefer my property value to stay high rather than let a teacher or a nurse live in this community." It is selfishness disguised as civic virtue. Is there any hope? Is this system fatal? There are cracks in the wall. Some places are waking up. Minneapolis recently ended single-family zoning. They said you can build a duplex or a triplex on any residential lot in the city. The state of Oregon did something similar. California is slowly forcing cities to approve granny flats and backyard cottages. These are small victories. But the resistance is fierce. Wealthy communities are suing the state governments to stop these laws. They are declaring their towns to be mountain lion habitats to avoid building housing. I am serious. A town in California tried to block affordable housing by claiming the entire town was a sanctuary for mountain lions. They will use any excuse to stop construction. The problem is deeply improved in our culture. We have been sold a dream that the only valid way to live is in a detached house with a lawn and a white picket fence, far away from anything commercial. We have been told that density is bad, that apartments are slums, and that renters are second-class citizens. Until we change that cultural mindset, the laws will be hard to change. We need to realize that density is not a bad word. Density means walkability. It means having a coffee shop on the corner. It means better public transit because there are enough people to support it. It means lower carbon emissions because people drive less. And most importantly, it means affordability. You cannot have affordable housing without density. You cannot have cheap land in a major city. The only way to make it cheap is to slice it up into smaller pieces. The crisis we are in is not an accident. It is a policy choice. We chose to prioritize the wealth of the old over the survival of the young. We chose to prioritize the aesthetics of a suburb over the dynamism of a city. We chose to prioritize cars over people, and now the bill is coming due. We are entering a phase where the social contract is breaking. If a person works a full-time job, contributes to society, and does everything right, but still cannot afford a place to sleep, they eventually stop believing in the system. They stop working as hard. They stop participating. We are seeing this now with the lying flat movement in China or the quiet quitting in the West. It is a rational response to a rigged game. Why run on the treadmill if the treadmill is designed to never get you anywhere? The solution is simple, but it is not easy. It requires stripping power away from local neighbors. It means telling a homeowner, no, you do not own the view from your window, and you do not get to decide what happens on the lot next door. It means legalizing the missing middle. It means abolishing parking mandates. It means treating housing like shelter, not like a stock market asset. If we don't do this, we are heading toward a world of permanent renters controlled by a handful of giant corporate landlords who can navigate the complex zoning laws that regular people can't. And we are heading toward a society where your financial destiny is determined not by how hard you work, but by whether your parents bought a house in 1980. That is not a free market. That is a caste system. The house you grew up in, that modest, affordable family home, was a triumph of a system that wanted people to own a stake in their country. Making that house illegal was the biggest economic mistake of the last century. We have the blueprints, we have the technology, we have the space. We just need the permission. If you want to understand more about how the economy is rigged against the average person and what might happen next in this global financial mess, you should watch this video next.